huge cowboy bought the Barren woman for $1. She gave him 7 children in 8 years. The town sat at the edge of dry land where the wind never rested and hope often felt thin. People came here to disappear, not to begin again. Wooden houses leaned with age, and dust covered everything no matter how often it was swept away. Everyone knew everyone else's business, especially when that business was shame. The woman had lived in that town all her life. She was not old, but life had pressed on her early. Years before, she had been married with quiet dreams, but the marriage ended in silence and blame. When no child came, whispers followed her wherever she walked. At first, people spoke softly, pretending concerned. Later, the words grew sharp. They called her unlucky, then useless. Finally, they gave her a name she never chose and could never escape, Barren. After her marriage ended, she returned to her parents' small home. But even there, she felt like an extra weight. Food was scarce, work was hard to find, and every look reminded her that she was seen as a failure. She worked where she could, cleaning, sewing, carrying water, but it was never enough. Each year, her place in the town grew smaller, as if she were slowly fading. The cowboy arrived one summer without noise or announcement. He was hard to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face shaped by sun and wind, he looked like a man carved from the land itself. He owned a large stretch of land beyond the town, land others avoided because it was rough and unforgiving. He came into town only when necessary, spoke only when required, and left before anyone could ask questions. People knew him as a man who worked harder than anyone and trusted no one. Some said he chose the land because it matched him, lonely and stubborn. Others said he had reasons for staying distant, reasons buried deep and never spoken. What was clear was that he lived alone, and that seemed to suit him. One evening, the town gathered near the market, where deals were made and gossip spread faster than dust in the wind. The woman stood nearby, hoping to find work for the next day. That was when she heard her name spoken aloud, careless and loud. "She's still here," someone said. "No family wants her." Another voice laughed. "What use is she? No future." She lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear, though each word landed heavy. Then a new voice cut through the noise, low, calm, and unfamiliar. "I need a wife." The cowboy stood there, hat low, eyes steady. No emotion showed on his face. A short, uncomfortable silence followed. Someone finally asked what everyone else was thinking. "Why?" "I need help on the ranch," he said simply. "And a household." Eyes shifted toward the woman. She felt her chest tighten. This was not a proposal spoken with warmth or promise. It sounded more like a task that needed filling, like fixing a broken fence. Someone scoffed. "You know her story." "I've heard enough," the cowboy replied. The town leader, always eager to remove problems rather than solve them, leaned forward. "And what are you offering?" The cowboy reached into his pocket and placed a single coin on the table. $1. Gasps and murmurs followed. The amount was small, almost insulting, but everyone understood what it meant. It was not about money. It was about responsibility being passed on. The woman stood frozen. No one asked her what she wanted. They looked at her like an object finally finding a place to rest. She wanted to run. She wanted to shout that she was more than what they said. But hunger, fear, and years of being unseen held her still. A roof, regular meals, safety, these were things she could not ignore. The cowboy looked at her then. Really looked. His eyes were not cruel, but they were distant. "I won't hurt you," he said. "I won't lie to you either. Life will be hard, but you'll be fed. You'll have a place. No promises of love, no gentle words, just honesty." That night, she did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breathing of her parents and wondering if this was the end of one life or the beginning of another. She felt fear, but also something unexpected. Relief. The town had already decided her worth. At least this path led somewhere else. By morning, the decision was made. The wedding was small and quick. No music, no celebration. A few witnesses stood nearby, more curious than joyful. The woman wore a simple dress she had owned for years. The cowboy stood beside her, solid and unmoving. When it was over, she did not look back. The journey to the ranch was long. The land stretched wide and empty, the sky endless above them. They rode mostly in silence. She wondered what kind of life waited for her, what kind of man walked beside her. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words were clear and steady. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was low. The house was simple but strong, not warm, but not cruel either. He showed her where she would sleep, where food was kept, what needed to be done each day. "This is your home now," he said. She nodded, unsure how to feel. As night fell, she sat alone and realized something important. For the first time in years, no one was watching her with judgment. No whispers, no laughter, just quiet. She did not know it yet, but this quiet place, born from a deal no one believed in, was where everything would begin to change. If you want, I can now expand part 2 in the same style and length, or adjust pacing if you want it slower or more emotional. The days on the ranch began before the sun rose. The woman learned this quickly. The first morning she woke to the sound of boots moving across the wooden floor and the low creak of a door opening. By the time she stepped outside, the cowboy was already at work, moving with steady purpose as if the land itself had given him instructions. He did not tell her what to do right away. Instead, he worked as he always had, fixing fences, checking water, feeding animals. She watched from a distance at first, unsure where she fit in this wide, quiet place. Back in town, her days had been filled with noise. Voices, comments, judgment. Here, the silence felt heavy but also clean. Eventually, she began to help where she could. She swept the house, cooked simple meals, washed clothes by hand. Her movements were careful, almost cautious, as if she feared doing something wrong. She expected correction, maybe even anger. But the cowboy only nodded when he noticed her work. Sometimes he said thank you, other times nothing at all. Their conversations were short and practical. "There's more flour in the shed. The well pump sticks. Don't force it. Storm might come tonight." That was all. At night, they ate at the same table, but did not sit close. The lamp between them cast long shadows on the walls. She would speak when spoken to, answering politely, keeping her eyes down. He ate slowly, thoughtfully, never rushing her, never watching her too closely. She told herself this distance was good. She had not come here for affection. She had come for survival. Still, loneliness followed her like a quiet echo. The work was harder than she expected. Ranch life did not forgive weakness. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. More than once she fought tears as she scrubbed floors or carried water, but no one laughed. No one pointed. When she struggled to lift something heavy, the cowboy stepped in without comment, lifting it easily and setting it down as if it weighed nothing. Once, during a long afternoon, she lost her balance while carrying a bucket and nearly fell. He caught her arm, firm but gentle, steadying her before she hit the ground. Their eyes met for a brief second. There was surprise there, on both sides. He let go immediately, stepping back as if the moment had not happened. That night she lay awake thinking about it, not the touch itself, but the lack of judgment in it. Weeks passed. The ranch slowly began to feel less like a place she was visiting and more like a place she'd belonged to. She learned the patterns of the land, the way the wind changed before rain, the hours when the animals needed checking, the quiet moments just before sunset when everything seemed to pause. She also began to notice the cowboy more closely. He was not as cold as the town had said. He rose early and worked late, but he never complained. He treated the animals with care, spoke to them in a low voice as if they understood him. On some evenings, when the work was done, he would sit on the porch and stare at the horizon, thoughtful and still. Once, she asked him what he was thinking about. "Nothing that matters," he said, though his voice suggested otherwise. She did not press. There were no expectations placed on her beyond the work. He never reminded her why she was there or what the town had called her. In that silence, something inside her began to heal, slowly and quietly. She stood a little straighter. Her hands moved with more confidence. She even began to hum while cooking, a habit she had not realized she had lost. One afternoon, a supply wagon from town arrived. The driver glanced at her with open curiosity, eyes sharp with recognition. She felt her chest tighten, waiting for the familiar look of pity or mockery. But before the driver could speak, the cowboy stepped forward. "This is my wife," he said simply. There was no hesitation in his voice. The driver nodded and said nothing more. That single sentence stayed with her long after the wagon left. Not because it was loving, but because it was firm, final. As if her place was no longer open for debate, life between them remained careful. They did not share stories of the past. She did not ask why he chose such a lonely life, and he did not ask why her marriage had ended. It was an unspoken agreement. Some wounds did not need reopening. Still, trust began to form in small ways. He started asking her opinion about things, where to store supplies, how to fix parts of the house, what to plant near the fence. At first she answered cautiously, unsure if he truly wanted her thoughts. But when he listened and followed her suggestions, she felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. One evening, a sudden storm hit harder than expected. Rain poured down and wind shook the house. She grew anxious, memories of past nights, filled with fear rising in her mind. Without a word, the cowboy checked the doors and windows, then left a lantern burning near her room. "If you need anything, knock," he said. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She did not knock that night, but knowing she could made all the difference. As months passed, the town's voices faded from her thoughts. She no longer woke with the weight of old names pressing on her. On the ranch, she was simply herself, a woman who worked, learned, and endured. The cowboy, too, was changing, though he might not have noticed it himself. He came home earlier some evenings. He repaired parts of the house he had ignored for years. He brought small things from town, fabric, seeds, a book he thought she might like. "These were extra," he would say. She always thanked him, smiling softly. There was still distance between them, but it no longer felt cold. It felt careful, like two people walking across thin ice, unsure where it would hold. One night, as they sat quietly after dinner, she spoke without planning to. "I won't bring shame to your name," she said. He looked up surprised. "You already haven't." She searched his face, trying to understand his meaning. "You work hard," he continued. "You're honest. That's enough for me." For the first time in years, tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. She realized then that this marriage, built without dreams or promises, was slowly becoming something unexpected. Not love, not yet, but respect. And for two people who had lived without it for so long, that respect felt like solid ground. Neither of them knew what the future held. Neither dared to imagine it clearly. But as the ranch settled into its quiet rhythm, one truth became clear. What began as distance was slowly turning into connection, one steady day at a time. Time moved forward quietly on the ranch, marked by changing seasons and steady work. The woman no longer counted days the way she once had. Instead, she measured life by small signs: the growth of plants near the fence, the weight of stored grain, the way the mornings grew colder and then warm again. She felt stronger now, not just in her body, but in her heart. Still, she carried old fears deep inside, fears she rarely spoke aloud. One morning she noticed something different. At first she ignored it, thinking it was only tiredness from work. But as days passed, the feeling stayed. Her body felt unfamiliar, heavy, in a way she did not understand. She told herself not to imagine things. She had learned long ago that hope could hurt more than disappointment. Weeks passed before the truth became impossible to ignore. The realization did not bring joy right away. It brought fear. Her hands shook as she sat alone in the small room, staring at the floor. The word the town had given her echoed loudly in her mind. What if this was a mistake? What if her body failed again? What if she spoke and the silence that followed broke something between them? For days, she said nothing. She continued her work, though her thoughts wandered. The cowboy noticed her quietness, but did not question it. He had learned that she spoke when ready, and he respected that. Still, he watched her more closely, noticing when she paused to rest or moved more slowly than usual. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with soft color, she finally spoke. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "All right." She struggled to find the words. Her throat felt tight. "I think I might be expecting a child." The air between them felt suddenly still. He did not speak right away. His face showed no anger, no excitement, only surprise. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of her words needed time to settle. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "No," she answered honestly. "But I believe so." "Then we'll be careful," he said. "And we'll see." No celebration, no doubt spoken aloud. Just acceptance. She did not know whether to feel relieved or afraid. Part of her wanted reassurance, but another part was grateful he did not question her worth or accuse her of imagining things. That night, she cried quietly, not from sadness, but from the release of holding so much inside. The days that followed were filled with quiet changes. He took on more of the heavier work without explanation. When she protested, he shook his head. "Plenty to do," he said. "You handle what you can." He began checking on her more often, offering water, reminding her to rest. These were small acts, but to her they felt enormous. She had never been cared for this way, not without condition, not without blame. As her body changed, her emotions did too. Some mornings she woke filled with hope, imagining a small life growing safely inside her. Other mornings, fear returned, sharp and sudden. A piece of you. She remembered the town's laughter, the way people had spoken about her as if she were broken beyond repair. The thought of their voices made her chest ache. When the time came for confirmation, the cowboy made the journey himself, returning with quiet certainty in his eyes. "It's true," he said. She closed her eyes and let the words wash over her. True, real, possible. Still, she guarded her heart. She did not speak of names or futures. She focused on one day at a time, one careful step forward. The cowboy watched her closely, though he rarely spoke of the child. But sometimes she noticed him standing near her longer than necessary, his eyes thoughtful, almost protective. As months passed, word reached the town anyway. News traveled faster than wagons. When the supply driver came again, his surprise was clear. He said nothing unkind, but his raised eyebrows told the story. The whispers returned, but different now. Curious, disbelieving. Really? She felt the old shame rise again, but this time it did not take hold the same way. When the driver left, the cowboy placed his hand briefly on her shoulder. "People will talk," he said. "They always do." "I know." But something inside her had changed. She was no longer living under their roof or their rules. Their words did not reach her the way they once had. Her body tired easily. Nights were long. Sometimes fear returned without warning, whispering that she would lose everything she had begun to believe in. On those nights, the cowboys stayed closer, even if they did not speak. When the day finally came, it came suddenly. The sky was pale, and the air felt tight. She woke with a sharp understanding that this was the day. Fear rose again, stronger than before. She had no family nearby. No women from the town. Only the quiet ranch and the man who had once been a stranger. She called his name. He was there instantly. The hours that followed were long and exhausting. Pain came in waves, leaving her breathless and shaking. Through it all, he stayed steady. He brought water, followed instructions carefully, spoke to her in a low, calming voice. "You're doing well," he said again and again. "Just keep going." She held onto those words like a rope in deep water. When it was over, when the long night finally broke into morning, the sound that filled the room was small but strong. A cry. Clear and alive. Tears streamed down her face as she held the child close, hardly believing what she saw and felt. The baby was warm, real, perfect in a way words could not explain. The cowboy stood nearby, silent. His face changed in a way she had never seen before. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out, unsure. "Do you want to hold?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. As he took the child into his arms, something shifted deep inside him. The weight was small, but the meaning was heavy. He looked down, eyes filled with awe and disbelief. "She's strong," he said quietly. The woman smiled through tears. "She is." That day marked a turning point neither of them had expected. The town reacted as predicted. Shock first, then silence. Some could not bring themselves to believe it. Others felt embarrassed by their past words. No one came to apologize, but no one dared speak openly against her again. On the ranch, life changed completely. Sleep became rare. Work schedules shifted, the house filled with sounds it had never known before. The cowboy adjusted without complaint, learning new routines, protecting quiet moments fiercely. The woman watched him carefully. She saw how he checked on the child at night, how he softened without realizing it, how his world slowly began to turn around this small life. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe something dangerous and beautiful. Maybe she had never been what the town said she was. Maybe her life had not been empty, it had only been waiting. And though neither of them spoke of it yet, a quiet truth settled between them. This child was not just a surprise. It was a beginning that would change everything. The ranch never felt quiet again after the first child arrived. Even when the baby slept, the air seemed alive, filled with a new kind of purpose. The woman moved through her days differently now. Tired, yes, but also steady. Every small sound pulled her attention. Every breath from the tiny life reminded her that something precious depended on her. The cowboy changed too, though he rarely spoke of it. He woke even earlier, worked even harder, and watched the land with sharper care. He repaired fences before they broke, stored more supplies, and planned for winters further ahead than ever before. The ranch was no longer just a place to survive. It was a place to protect. The town watched from a distance. People came up with reasons, explanations, excuses for being wrong before. Some said it was luck, some said it would never happen again. Others stayed silent, uncomfortable with how easily their certainty had fallen apart. But life on the ranch did not slow to listen. The second child came sooner than expected. This time, the woman recognized the signs earlier. Fear still came, but it no longer ruled her. She knew now that her body was not her enemy. The cowboy did not question it when she told him. He only nodded and quietly adjusted their routines again. When the second child arrived, strong and healthy, the ranch felt fuller than ever. The walls seemed warmer. The nights, though sleepless, felt less lonely. The cowboy learned how to hold a baby without looking afraid. He learned the meaning of different cries. He learned that strength did not always come from silence. With each passing year, the family grew. Children came one after another, each with their own nature. One was quiet and thoughtful. Another laughed easily. One followed the cowboy everywhere, while another stayed close to the woman's side. The ranch echoed with footsteps, voices, and questions about the world. The work multiplied. The days grew longer. There were moments of deep exhaustion when the woman felt her strength slipping. Some nights she cried quietly, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. The cowboy noticed even when she tried to hide it. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he told her once, placing a cup of water in her hands. She looked at him, surprised. "I'm used to it," she said. "I know," he replied. "That doesn't mean you should keep doing it." They began to lean on each other in ways they never had before, not with grand words, but with shared effort. When she was tired, he cooked. When he was worn from the fields, she listened. They argued sometimes, about small things, about worry, about fear, but the arguments ended with understanding instead of distance. The town could no longer ignore what was happening. People who once whispered now stared openly. Children pointed in wonder. Some neighbors began to visit, curious more than kind. They brought small gifts, clothes, tools, food, not always out of goodness, but out of disbelief. "She has a full house," they said. "Yes," others replied. "She always did. We just couldn't see it." The woman felt no need to defend herself. Her life spoke louder than any words she could offer. The cowboy became known not just as a strong landowner, but as a devoted father. He taught the older children how to work with care, not force. He showed them how to respect the land, how to stand by their word. He was firm but fair, quiet but present. Sometimes, late at night, after the children were asleep, he sat on the porch and watched them through the window. The woman joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You ever think about how different things might have been?" she asked once. He nodded. "All the time." "Do you regret it?" she asked carefully. He looked at her then, really looked. Not for a moment. There were seasons of drought, sickness, and loss. One winter was especially hard, and food ran low. Fear crept back into the woman's heart, reminding her of older days. But this time, she was not alone. The family worked together. The children learned early that survival was shared. The ranch endured, not because of strength alone, but because of unity. The woman often thought about the day she had been traded for a single dollar. The memory no longer burned. It felt distant, almost unreal. That coin had never defined her. It had only marked a turning point. She was no longer the woman the town had labeled and discarded. She was a mother, a partner, the center of a living, breathing world. The cowboy, once alone and closed off, now laughed more than he ever had. He spoke more freely. He planned not just for himself, but for futures he could see running through the fields. 7 children. 8 years, a life no one had predicted. And though challenges still lay ahead, one truth was undeniable. What had begun as a quiet agreement had grown into something powerful, built not on expectation, but on endurance, respect, and an unbreakable bond formed day by day. The ranch stood strong, not because of the land or the house, but because of the people who filled it with life. The years moved forward like a long road, sometimes smooth, sometimes rough, but always leading somewhere new. The ranch no longer felt like the edge of the world. It felt like the center of a life that had grown bigger than either of them ever imagined. The children grew quickly. The oldest began helping with real work, learning responsibility early. The younger ones followed behind, curious and loud, turning every task into an adventure. Mornings were busy, filled with movement and voices. Evenings were calmer, with shared meals and tired laughter. The woman often paused during these moments, watching her children sit around the table. There were times she had to blink back tears, not from sadness, but from disbelief. This lifeful, noisy, real had once felt impossible. Now it surrounded her every day. The cowboy noticed these quiet moments. He never teased her about them. He understood without words. He, too, carried memories of another life, one marked by silence and isolation. Sometimes, when the house grew still late at night, he thought about the man he used to be. That man felt distant now, like someone he had once known but no longer recognized. The town changed its tone completely. People no longer spoke of the past. They spoke of the family on the ranch, with a mix of respect and awe. Children from town talked about the big house filled with laughter. Adults spoke carefully, aware of how wrong they had once been. Some tried to apologize in small ways, extra kindness, gentle words, favors offered without being asked. The woman accepted these gestures politely, but without need. She did not seek forgiveness. She had already found peace. One afternoon, a woman from town visited with her young daughter. As they watched the children play, the visitor spoke quietly. "I used to believe what people said," she admitted. "I was wrong." The woman nodded calmly. "People often are," she replied. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. As time passed, the ranch became a place others looked to for guidance. The cowboy shared what he knew about land and work. The woman helped other mothers, offering comfort and advice. Without trying, they became part of something larger than themselves. The children grew into their own paths. Each one was different, carrying pieces of both parents. Some loved the land deeply. Others dreamed of places beyond it. The cowboy listened to their dreams with care, even when those dreams included leaving one day. "You don't belong to the land," he told them. "The land belongs to you only if you choose it." The woman taught them something just as important, that they were never defined by what others said about them. She never spoke badly of the town or the past. She taught them by example, by standing steady in who she was. As her children grew, she found more time to reflect. Sometimes she held the old coin, the $1 piece that had once symbolized her worth to others. She kept it not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how little that judgment had meant. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky soft and gold, she sat beside the cowboy on the porch. The children were older now, their laughter drifting from farther away. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. He nodded. "Often." "Does it still bother you?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. It reminds me how wrong the world can be, and how right life can turn out." The cowboy reached for her hand, something that had become natural over the years. Not dramatic, not forced, just familiar and steady. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd have a family. I thought I was built to be alone. I thought I was built to be empty." They sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that felt full instead of heavy. As the years continued, challenges still came. Loss visited, as it always does. There were goodbyes, difficult choices, moments of worry, but the family faced them together. They had learned that strength did not mean avoiding hardship. It meant standing through it. The ranch stood as a quiet witness to everything they had built. The walls carried stories. The fields carried footsteps. The land, once lonely, now carried memory. The woman often thought about how easily her life could have gone another way, if fear had won. If she had believed the names given to her. If she had stayed in a place that saw her only as a problem to be solved, instead she had chosen to step into the unknown. The cowboy had done the same, though he might not have realized it at the time. What began as a practical decision had changed him completely. He had learned that care did not weaken a man. It shaped him. In the end, the story people told about them was simple, but powerful. A woman once called Barren had raised 7 strong children. A man once known only for his strength had built a home full of warmth. A single dollar had been exchanged, but what followed was priceless. And if anyone ever asked how it all happened, the woman would smile softly and say, "It didn't happen all at once. It happened day by day, when we chose not to give up on ourselves or each other." That was the truth.